this is an in the bath, recorded on a phone, quick rundown of my interest in the Essex Boys case. Obviously the murders of Patrick Tate, Tony Tucker and Craig Rolfe down an isolated farm track or a dirt track, or how many different ways it's described, in Rant, Essex in December 1995. Everybody knows the story. If you don't know the story, I don't know why you're listening to this, but regardless of that, my first interest, of course, would have been the original Rise of the Footsie movie. I knew of the Essex Boys movie from 2000, didn't really pay much attention. And obviously I remember very vaguely the news reports on the TV around about, just after the murders. I don't know if I remember anything to do with the trial. If it came up, it probably wouldn't have sort of been much of a memory, but I always just remember the Range Rover on the back of the low loader coming out of the lane. That was, I don't really remember what it was all about. I don't know if it's been implanted that I knew that it was three geezers in a Range Rover, or whether that's just been added over the years sort of thing, but I just remember it being quite a big thing back then. And just literally just images of this Range Rover being brought out of the lane on the back of the low loader, not knowing at that point that it contained the three bodies until many years later. And then I say there was the Rise of the Footsie movie, obviously the sequel a few years later. And then I think my way back into it, the real interest, was after the Rise of the Footsie 3 came out, the Pat Tate story, and I thought, are they still making, how are they able to, and then there was obviously the 2015 Truth DVD from, I don't know if I should say his name, but, Bernard O'Mahony. And that was a good documentary, but disappointing at the same time, when we was meant to find out who the real killers were. Whether we did, I don't know. I don't know who killed them, so I can't say for a fact whether the truth at the end of that DVD is true or not. But there was obviously the controversy of the recording of John Wilmes, convicted man's brother, Jack Wilmes' brother. That was disappointing, in fact, because I kind of hoped that I honestly believe we would get a random name. This is who really killed him. Bernard had found out over the years with all the research, because obviously he fought for many years to try and get the release of Jack and Mick, and then for whatever reasons he then changed his side as such, and then said that they were guilty. And then in the DVD we just found out that it was just still Mick and Jack. And I honestly believe we were going to get a name like the name we've had put forward by Billy Jasper, Mr. D, the actual name of the person, that name, and I don't know if it's public knowledge as such to name that now, but it's not a secret of who Mr. D is. It's not who a lot of people believe. It's the other person. How did I describe it on a rant years ago, or a couple of years ago? It reminds me of Bean. It reminds me of Bean. So if you think it's the other DH, it's not. You're mistaken. It reminds me of, the first name reminds me of Bean. I should just say it, but I don't know, where we stand on that side of things. And Facebook, the groups, I tried to do my bit with just posting. So there's always something to read, something, you don't want a group where it's just stigma all the time. I don't know if even that's the right bloody word, but, just dead in the water where you've just got no traffic, because it's all about really the members. It's all about them making posts and questions and stuff. But obviously you do get times when the groups are quiet, and you do get times where members aren't as active as what they normally are. So then you want some sort of traffic on there. So I try to post an article or one of the documents, or even if it's just a photo, transcript, whatever it is, always trying to get something new, something different. But obviously the case is 26 years old, and there's only so much, so much new information you can get out there. I mean, recently we had this CCR Criminal Cases Review Commission document from, it's really old, it's 10 years old, but there was certain information that just wasn't in the public domain, and that had been, and it is now out there. It's not shit tons of information, pardon my language, but it's just there's little bits here and there. So you do get different theories, and there are different people's opinions on what happened, so it does keep the group interesting. And you've obviously got the YouTube channels, Crime Team to Courtroom, Essex True Crime, Galactic 73, used to have Theo, LWD, with his theories. And so yeah, there's strange interest in the case, and I'll never quite explain, because on the surface, when you try to say to people, 3 dead people in a Range Rover from 26 years ago, they just look at you like, why the fuck do you care about that? And it's because it's just not as straightforward as the amount of different people that have gone through the minds of, when we've discussed who we believe was responsible, has changed so much over the years, with people that now we believe are involved, regardless of the 3 people that Billy Jasper named. Regardless of the 3 people Billy Jasper named, Jesse Gale being one of them, obviously, and then Patsy Clark and Mr. D. Regardless of them 3, there are people now that we discuss, that we believe are involved, that for years didn't even cross my mind. And I'm not talking about Nipper. I know there was Nipper's confession 2 years ago now, a year and a half ago, Christmas, with Liquid Bullet, who in the last year and a half have gone from strength to strength with their interviews and have got a lot lined up. So the attraction to the case is a weird one. It's hard to explain to anyone that's from on the outside, that's just looking in. There's, the theories, and for the last, has it been 6 months now? Or year even? It seems like 5. The Billy Jasper theory. And I'm not even going to get into all that confusion that's what's been going on with that lately. That's going to need to be a separate video that I've been planning to do for ages. And every time I'm going to do this Billy Jasper video, more of this audio kept getting released. And now it's gone quiet. I thought, I'm going to do this Jasper video. And as trying to make it, there's just confusion at the moment of where, and it shouldn't really make a difference, but there is a confusion about where Mr. D was dropped off by Billy Jasper. There is a map. There are points on this map on Rectory Lane. And without getting into this he said, she said debate, which really needs to be cleared up at some point soon, because it just clouds the focus of what we're really thinking about. And that's TMI is saying that Billy Jasper dropped off Mr. D at a different point to where Bernard O'Mahony is saying that Billy Jasper dropped him. Now, what we have ourselves to go along with this is the court transcript of Billy Jasper in court back at November 97. What we don't have are the statements. Now, if within these statements it states Billy Jasper says that he was dropped off at where, roughly on the screen right now, you see the map, number 8. Even though I said I wasn't going to get into this. So you can see roughly that's where TMI saying is dropped off. And number 2 and 3 is where Bernard, not just Bernard's saying it's where the court says, and fair enough, it kind of, without getting into it all right now, but the statements, if they stay the same as what the court transcripts say, then it looks like it's saying that the Billy Jasper was in fact dropped Mr. D at the 2 and 3. But I haven't seen the statements, so I can't say whether Billy Jasper, in his police interviews, describes it so it sounds like it's at number 8. From what I've seen, it does sound like he described number 2, 3, but I could be wrong on that. But what that means is that one of those 2 are wrong. And that's what makes it a bit confusing right now, and a bit like I don't want to just say that either person is wrong, because without seeing the statements, And I haven't seen the statements, and I guess that we're not going to see the statements until the Sky documentary airs, which is end of the year, beginning of the next year, when they air. If they haven't already been released by before the documentary and the statements, then we will see what Billy Jasper has said. Also naming the three: Jesse, Patsy, Mr. D, because he wouldn't name them in court. But you've got to remember, when Billy Jasper was in court, it was November 97, when Billy Jasper did give out his information about the Essex, about the murder, it was January 96. So it was a long time. Things could have changed for Jasper in that time. In the time between telling his story. But it would be interesting to see these statements and what was said, and whether we can just, not just that, and you're probably thinking, what difference does it make if he was dropped off at 8 or 2 or 3 or 6 or 5 or 4? Because what's being said is that he could not make it to Workhouse Lane from being dropped off from the 2 and 3 area where the gates are. I've never been there, I can't say. But if it is impossible, in fact, to walk from the 2 and 3 area to Workhouse Lane, and that's where Billy Jasper said he dropped off Mr. D, and that's in fact impossible, 100% impossible, to walk that way from 2 and 3 area, from the lane, from where this track's meant to have been, then does that say that Billy Jasper's not telling the truth? Is that fact that this whole, it's just smoke and mirrors? It was just Billy Jasper trying to get time off a reduced sentence as such. But Billy Jasper did know a lot of information that he really shouldn't have known. And in fact, my first hearing of Billy Jasper was in books, and when it was said that he directed the police away from Workhouse Lane, in my eyes, I was like, oh, he don't know what he's fucking on about, does he? He's just, he's getting lost. But in fact, he wasn't going to Workhouse Lane. He wasn't going to the alternative lane, the route from Workhouse Lane to the Wheatsheaf pub, what used to be the Wheatsheaf pub. He wasn't going there. He was going past. He was going to Rectory Lane. That's where he says he dropped Mr. D. Mr. D might have been dropped. And this is a theory, and the three were already dead. In the Range Rover killed it earlier. But why is Mr. D returning to the crime scene? And there's the theory that he's returning to, apologies for the dripping tap, by the way, to collect a package, possibly the coke that was not taken by the shooter. Returning to the scene of a crime is a risk. But if you're coked up, it's less than but then walking through fields, this gets a lot of, how do you want to say, shade thrown at it. In a roll neck, in trainers, in a tracksuit, walking through fields. People go, just trying to imagine it. But white snow covering fields, and then you've got this man, but who's looking out their window? One thing's for sure, and here's me saying I won't get into the Billy Jasper theory. One thing's for sure, they were shot dead at midnight, just after midnight, 12:30. You match up the timings of what Billy Jasper. You match up the timings of what Billy Jasper says, the time that he dropped off Mr. D, and the shots from Stephen Rogers. The other day, I was having a conversation with someone that was describing that they could hear the church bells that morning, on a Sunday morning. And it had me thinking of the distance, because the church from where the person was describing was at least a mile away. And I thought, well, of course you're going to hear the church in the morning. Churches are quite loud. And then it had me thinking of distances and sound travelling. And that sound travelling, Stephen Rogers hearing the shots. Because if Stephen Rogers, that night, if the three were killed earlier in the night, 7, 8, 9, what was Stephen Rogers hearing? There is one funny theory. And it comes back to drops being made, which is one of my beliefs, that the three could have been down there on the belief, not that there was drops, on the belief there was going to be a drop. But then who do they believe was flying the plane over? And then that comes back to, is that person involved in them believing that they were dropping something just to get them down that lane that evening? But there's just so many appearances, so many sightings of the three around that area if it's them that morning. So the funny theory is that it's things being dropped from a plane, cannabis bars, if it's the sound of cannabis bars being dropped in, say, for instance, wooden crates or something, which is quite just even funny thinking about it. Whatever the sounds were, it always comes back to possibility of that was the three getting killed. Then you've got the pub sightings. The man that said they left the pub before 6 o'clock. Before 6. And the non-cancellation of the restaurant booking and blah, blah, blah. And you can be here all day with a Billy Jasper theory. And that's the intentions, is to do a Billy Jasper video and have that part of it, this 8 or 2, 3. And maybe by the time I get around to making this video, there will be less confusion. And all it would take is seeing the statements. We need to see everything that Billy Jasper says, and hopefully in time it will get released. Everything that Billy Jasper said, the audio and the transcripts. If Billy Jasper is lying about dropping off Mr. D, and he's saying he dropped him off at 2 and 3, the gates, and there is no route from 2 and 3, then there you go. That should be the end of the story. But if he did drop him off at number 8, which is further up the road, and it's a straight line pretty much to Workhouse Lane, if that's the case, then there's a route. So what started as a little ramble about how I got interested in this guy turned into this really Jasper theory, because that's currently what is on the mind and the next video that I'm going to make, and I'm going to try and keep these as frequent as possible, because I've just been putting them off for ages and they need to be done. But the reason this is being recorded today in the bath, which is very strange, I must admit, but it's just literally I often ramble in the bath, and I always think to myself, I should record this, because this is so much. You stick a mic in front of me and I just I'm even struggling to narrate the books at the moment. The Colton Leach Muscle book, some of the chapters, it's just, I used to be able to talk, I used to be able to just see things on a piece of paper and just say it, and now I struggle to do that. But I'm going to do these as often as possible, not in the bath with the dripping tap. There's always so much to say on this case, and if you don't think that's the case, then you should ask my ex-girlfriend. She wasn't my ex-girlfriend before I got interested in this, and now she is. I can't stand that fuck if I have to hear them fucking names again. That fucking Billy Jasper. She threw some names at me once in an argument. I didn't think she'd fucking even heard their names before, excuse my language. If I have to hear that bloody Bowman's name again. I was like, so she does listen then. So it's probably better just for me to talk into my phone, throw some images to it, stick it on this channel, and you lot can have to listen to my crap instead. But you take care, and I'll speak to you lot soon. Look after yourself.